Why was everyone staring at her shoes instead of her face? The helicopter's rotors still echoed across the mountains as Ana Sharma stepped off the ramp and onto the gravel of forward operating base Nightingale. Dust curled around her boots, practical hiking boots, not the polished shine of a soldier's uniform. She wore plain gray slacks, a dark jacket that barely cut the wind, and her hair silver streaked through black, pulled tight in a bun that spoke more of function than pride. She didn't look like a savior. She looked like someone's grandmother, misplaced in a war zone. And maybe that was the point. The whispers started before she reached the command tent. Corporal Elias Vance heard them, low, sharp-edged comments from soldiers who hadn't slept in 3 days. That's the consultant. Looks like my librarian back home. We needed a ghost from Langley. They sent us a retiree. Vance couldn't disagree. He saw her, shoulders straight, face lined with years, but unnervingly calm. She didn't match the crisis unfolding around them. The base was in a quiet panic. They had lost the cipher, not just a line of code, but the master key to their entire surveillance grid. Every drone, every satellite, every eye in the sky had gone dark. Until it was recovered, they were blind in hostile territory. 3 days of chaos, 3 days of shouting, brute force cyber assaults, and desperate countermeasures. Nothing had worked, and now they were pinning their last hope on her. A name pulled from some old list, a recommendation buried in files no one here had clearance to read. Ana Sharma, logistics specialist, retired. When Colonel Madsen met her at the entrance of the Tactical Operations Center, the contempt in his eyes could have cut through steel. 6'2", pale with exhaustion, his career hanging by a thread. He loomed over her, a deliberate act of dominance. "Miss Sharma," he said, his voice a growl. No handshake, no courtesy, just suspicion. "I was told you're logistics, retired. With all due respect, ma'am, I don't need someone to count rivets. I need a hacker, a cryptographer, someone who can fight this breach." His tone was a dismissal, a warning that she didn't belong. Anna's eyes never met his. They slid past him, calm, detached, scanning the cables strung along HESCO barriers, the subtle flicker of overhead lights, the rotation of tired guards at the perimeter. "You have a breach," she said softly. "Not a question, a statement." Madsen's jaw tightened. "Yes, and I'm running my people ragged trying to stop it. What's your plan? Reorganize my supply tent." He meant it as an insult. She didn't rise to it, didn't blink. Her voice stayed level. "My plan is to observe. I'll need a workspace, a terminal with your schematics, and a pot of black tea." The room stilled. The request was so ordinary, so absurd against the backdrop of panic, that for a moment even Madsen faltered. He wanted to throw her back on the helicopter, prove to CENTCOM how ridiculous this was. But orders had come from people above him, people he couldn't defy. "Fine," he snapped. "Sergeant, find her a corner, give her a terminal, and get the woman her tea." He stormed back inside, convinced he'd wasted precious minutes. He didn't notice the flicker of calculation in her eyes as she traced the sag of a power cable that no one else had bothered to see. He didn't know he had just dismissed the architect of the very security protocols his enemies had exploited. They gave her a converted storage closet, a metal desk, a terminal, recycled air heavy with the scent of hot electronics. Corporal Vance set up her connection, clearly thinking it was a babysitting job. He was halfway out the door when her voice stopped him. "Corporal, I need the passive sensor logs, 96 hours, seismic, acoustic, electromagnetic." He frowned. "Ma'am, with respect, that's junk data, dust in the air, vibrations from the generators." "I'm aware." Her fingers already hovered over the keys, eyes focused not on the battlefield but on schematics of the base's power and fiber optics. "Bring it to me." He did, out of duty, not belief. And when he returned with tea, she thanked him not by rank but by name. A small thing, but it caught. He lingered a moment, watched her work. She wasn't frantic like the others, hammering at keyboards, launching counterattacks into the void. Her movements were precise, calm. She opened window after window, arranging data streams into a mosaic only she seemed to understand. She wasn't looking for code. She was looking for patterns. Hours passed. The base vibrated with nervous energy, but her room stayed still, cold, methodical. Vance checked in often, each time finding her exactly the same, a statue in the glow of the screen. She cross-referenced power fluctuations with bursts of anomalous chatter, mapped fiber lines against forgotten conduits. She was building a picture no one else could see. And while the colonel's brightest officers burned through processors trying to kick down a digital front door, Ana Sharma was quietly studying the plumbing. By midnight, the pressure broke. At 400 hours, one of their most advanced drones, an RQ-80 White Bat, went rogue. Its feed replaced with a single taunting string of text. "We see you." Then it vanished. The room exploded in panic. Shouts, slammed fists, frantic orders. They were blind, and now their most valuable asset was in enemy hands. "Launch the Reapers," Madsen barked. Negative. If the enemy held the cipher, they could hijack any drone they launched. Every option collapsed under its own risk. The shouting stopped, replaced by silence thick enough to choke. That was when the sound of shoes broke the stillness. Soft, steady steps. Ana stood in the doorway, an empty mug in her hand. The chaos had pulled her from her corner. She looked at the colonel, at the faces around the holographic map, at the blinking message taunting them. "You're fighting the wrong war," she said. The words cut through the room. Madsen's exhaustion flared into anger. "And what war should I be fighting, Miss Sharma? The one in your utility schematics." He meant to humiliate her, but his voice cracked with desperation, and everyone heard it. Ana stepped forward, calm as ever. She dismissed the tactical display with a swipe and pulled up a different map, lines of power and fiber, old and half forgotten. "The ghost isn't in the machine," she said. "It's in the walls." She traced a thin, nearly invisible fiber optic line. A relic, supposedly decommissioned years ago, but not severed, not dead. "Your enemy isn't a hacker 1,000 miles away. They're close, very close." The room leaned in, the silence sharpened. She explained the power fluctuations weren't random, the seismic spikes weren't noise. Someone had tapped into this line, less than a kilometer from where they stood. They hadn't hacked their way in. They had walked in through a forgotten service entrance the base itself had left behind. The colonel's sneer was gone. His face shifted, slowly, painfully, into comprehension. Ana Sharma, dismissed as a quartermaster, had just solved in minutes what his entire command had failed to see in days. The weight of it landed. They hadn't been fighting a digital ghost. They'd been outflanked by something far more dangerous: patience. The officers around him looked not at their colonel, but at her, the quiet woman who had turned their nightmare inside out. For the first time, Colonel Madsen's voice was steady, stripped of arrogance. "How can you be sure?" Her reply was simple, calm, irrefutable. "The machine didn't betray you. Your walls did." And just like that, the tide shifted. How do you measure the weight of silence? In the Tactical Operations Center, silence was heavier than gunfire. Officers who had been shouting themselves hoarse for 72 hours now stood frozen, eyes locked on the glowing schematics Ana had brought up. It wasn't a battlefield map. It wasn't lines of drones or patrol routes. It was plumbing, power, fiber, forgotten conduits that had slept under the dirt for years. And yet somehow, it was the battlefield that mattered. Her finger tapped the screen once, precise and deliberate. "Here," she said, "a decommissioned fiber line. It was never severed. It exits through an old drainage culvert less than a kilometer north." The junior officers leaned in, breath caught, expressions flickering between disbelief and dawning realization. Madsen stared hard at her, fighting the instinct to resist. But the pieces aligned too perfectly. "You're telling me," his voice cracked, but he pressed on, This entire breach isn't cyber, it's physical. They've been inside our network this whole time. Ana didn't nod. She didn't need to. She let the evidence hang in the room, daring them to deny it. One of the lieutenants muttered almost to himself, "The M spikes. The drilling vibrations we flagged as background noise. It wasn't the mountains, it was them." The truth landed like shrapnel. For 3 days they had been clawing at shadows, burning resources, destroying morale. And this woman, this retiree who didn't belong, had dismantled the illusion in under 6 hours. Madsen's voice dropped low, stripped of sarcasm. "How can you be certain?" Her eyes met his for the first time, calm, steady. "Because chaos leaves a pattern, you just have to care enough to see it." No bravado, no pride, just fact. The colonel felt his spine straighten, as though something inside him had been pulled taut again. For the first time in days, he wasn't drowning. He had a line to hold on to. "Captain," he ordered sharply, "thermal scan on those coordinates. Quiet. Low-altitude microdrone now." A minute later the captain's breath caught. "Sir, multiple heat signatures, shielded but they're there. And Jesus, composite reflection matches an RQ-80. Whispers erupted. Soldiers who had doubted her now stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. The colonel turned, fully facing Ana Sharma. The contempt that had poisoned his tone since her arrival was gone. In its place was something new, not yet trust, but respect forced by necessity. "They have the drone, they have the cipher, they're dug in and waiting for us. A frontal assault would be suicide." He paused, his voice softened, almost reluctant. "What do you suggest?" This was the second test. Identifying the problem was one thing, but solutions carried blood on their backs. Anna's eyes narrowed slightly, a predator's focus. "Conventional assault is exactly what they want. You'll lose men, you'll lose the drone, you'll hand them a victory." "Then what?" His voice sharpened, impatient. Her reply was steady. "You need a surgical team, small, quiet, in and out before they realize what happened. Sever their connection, recover the asset, eliminate the threat. No alarms, no firefight." Murmurs spread. A team like that didn't exist on this base. Everyone knew it. Madsen almost laughed, but the fatigue in his bones made it bitter. "We don't have a team," he said flatly. "A skill set like that takes weeks to prepare." Ana looked down at her slacks, her jacket, her sensible shoes, and then back up. "You don't have a team," she said softly, "but you have an operator." The room froze. Madsen blinked at her, as if the words had rearranged his reality. "You." She didn't answer with words. She simply held his gaze, unflinching. Something inside him shifted. He remembered the order from CENTCOM, the insistence on her presence. He remembered the classified clearance that had pushed her through the bureaucracy like a knife through silk. It wasn't logistics they had sent him. It was something else. He exhaled slowly, as if releasing the last of his resistance. "What do you need?" Her voice carried no drama, no ceremony. "My case from the chopper and Corporal Vance." Vance, who had been standing quietly against the wall, felt his stomach plummet. Him? He was a comms tech, a babysitter. He wasn't built for this. But Ana didn't explain herself. She didn't justify the choice. She simply named it, and in doing so, it became fact. Madsen gave a sharp nod. "Get her whatever she asks for." They moved quickly to the landing pad, the cold dawn wind cutting through their uniforms. Soldiers gathered, drawn by the unusual activity, whispering among themselves as two large pelican cases were rolled forward. Ana crouched by the first case, directed Vance to open it. Inside lay compact, unfamiliar communications gear, tools sharper, leaner, more advanced than anything the base had ever seen. Efficient, silent, built for work that didn't officially exist. Then she opened the second case. The air seemed to thicken. Inside was no uniform, no flag, no rank, Just matte black combat gear, non-reflective, stripped of insignia, designed to erase identity rather than project it. A lightweight plate carrier. A low-profile helmet with multi-spectrum optics. A suppressed sidearm that looked more like an extension of intent than a weapon. This wasn't equipment issued to soldiers. It was crafted for ghosts. Without hesitation, she began to change. The soldiers fell silent, eyes fixed on the transformation. The gray slacks and jacket slid away. The grandmotherly silhouette dissolved. Piece by piece, she became someone else. Someone dangerous. Someone familiar only to whispers in high, classified rooms. The black suit clung to her like a second skin. When the visor slid down, obscuring her eyes, the shift was complete. Ana Sharma was gone. In her place stood Karice. The myth, the ghost, the operator they swore had vanished years ago. Colonel Madsen stared, his breath caught. He'd heard the name in passing, in rumors traded between senior officers like forbidden currency. Karice wasn't supposed to exist, and if she had retired long ago, her identity buried in layers of mundane cover stories. Yet here she was, standing before him. A secure line buzzed. High command. Madsen held out the satellite phone with a hand that wasn't entirely steady. They want a direct word. Ana no, Karice took the phone without ceremony. Karice, a voice crackled through, clipped, controlled. General Tanaka, head of Special Activities Division. Madsen recognized the weight of it, even if he'd never heard it before. It's been a long time, General. Her voice carried a slight distortion from the helmet's comms, but it didn't mask the familiarity. I read your assessment, Tanaka said. Classic breach. Some of your old students, no doubt, dusting off your playbook. Madsen's heart skipped. Your playbook. She had written the doctrine. She wasn't just a participant. She was the architect. They're sloppy, she said flatly. They left too much noise. Sloppy or not, that drone cannot remain in enemy hands. You are authorized full spectrum, any means necessary. His tone hardened, then softened just for a heartbeat. It's good to hear your voice again, Karice. Bring it home. Yes, General. She ended the call, returned the phone. Madsen's mind reeled, the weight of what had just passed over him almost crushing. Karice, the operator of whispered legend, the weapon of last resort. And he had dismissed her as a quartermaster. He wanted to apologize, to kneel, to beg forgiveness. Instead, he simply gave the only words he had left. Whatever you need, it's yours. She gave a single nod. Her visor hid her eyes, but something in the room shifted. The soldiers around them, hardened men, exhausted by failure, straightened their backs. The presence of one woman had restored what they had lost. Vance swallowed hard, staring at her from behind his comms gear. He had been chosen, not because he was the best, not because he was ready, but because she had seen something in him he couldn't see in himself. Fear churned in his chest, but so did something else, a spark. Karice turned to him, her voice calm through the headset. Stay 5 meters behind me. Do exactly as I say. Make no sound. Are we clear? He swallowed, nodded, whispered, yes, ma'am. She gave a sharp nod, then melted into the shadows of the hangar. The grandmother was gone. Only the ghost remained. What does silence sound like when your heartbeat is too loud to hear anything else? Corporal Elias Vance asked himself that question as he stumbled across jagged terrain, boots sliding on loose scree. His chest felt like a drum someone else was beating too fast. Every stone he dislodged cracked the silence of the mountains like glass, and every sound felt like a betrayal. Ahead of him, Ana no, Karice didn't stumble. She didn't breathe too hard. She moved as though the mountains themselves carried her forward, her black suit blending into every shadow cast by the sharp peaks. She wasn't running. She wasn't rushing. She flowed. Vance tried to follow in her footsteps, placing his boots where hers had been, but he was clumsy. Human. He was terrified of being the weak link she regretted choosing. Through the calm hum of his headset, her voice whispered, 200 meters, hostile patrol, 2 men, hold. He dropped flat against the rock, pressing his cheek to the cold ground, straining his ears. He heard nothing but the wind scratching through the stones. His night vision goggles revealed only darkness. Then faint movement, 2 figures, rifles slung casually, walking a lazy patrol along the ridge. Their posture was loose, unguarded. They thought they were safe. They thought the Americans were blind. Ana didn't move, didn't breathe. A statue carved from shadow, 3 minutes. That was how long she waited, still as the mountain, letting them pass. Vance thought his heart might tear through his ribs. When they were gone, she flowed forward again. He scrambled to keep up. The canyon mouth appeared at last, a jagged slit in the earth, blacker than the night around it. A guard stood half hidden in an alcove. His rifle rested in his hands, but his stance was bored, casual. Vance felt the training in his muscles. His hands lifted his rifle, finger brushing the trigger, but Anna's voice froze him. Negative, my mark. Before he could protest, before he could even think, she was gone. One blink she had been beside him, the next she was not. He scanned wildly, panic rising. Where had she? Then he saw. She had slipped low, moving along a depression in the rock below the guard's sightline. She rose behind him, sudden, silent, inhuman. One precise movement, no sound, no twitch. The guard was lowered gently to the ground as if falling asleep. Her voice returned, calm as ever. Sentry neutralized, move. Vance swallowed, his throat dry. He hadn't heard a thing, not a scuffle, not a breath. He thought of all the drills, the endless training, the rigid rules of engagement, and he realized none of it prepared him for this. She wasn't playing by rules. She was writing them. Inside the canyon, shadows clung thick, but the scene was exactly as she'd predicted. The drone, the RQ-80 White Bat, squatted like a massive predator under camouflage netting, its angular frame tethered to a generator. Cables snaked like veins to a cluster of equipment. 5 figures huddled inside a makeshift tent, faces lit by screens. They weren't soldiers. They were operators of a different kind, focused, twitchy, drunk on the arrogance of thinking they had beaten the Americans. Their attention was locked on their monitors, not the dark mouth of the canyon where death had just arrived. Anna's voice slipped into Vance's ear. Steady, sharp, corporal, the comms array, 30 meters left, connected to the power unit. Plant the scrambler at its base. You'll have 10 seconds once I initiate diversion. Then exfil. Do not wait for me. His mouth went dry. 10 seconds. Alone. The array was 30 meters away, a glowing tower of cables and steel. Ma'am, what about you? His voice cracked despite his effort to steady it. I have a different objective. The cipher hardware cannot leave this canyon. Neither can they. He understood. She wasn't here to scare them. She was here to erase them. Vance clutched the magnetic scrambler, its weight suddenly immense in his hand. His knees wanted to lock. His legs wanted to refuse, but her voice was there, calm, anchoring him. On my mark, she whispered, move on 3. 1. His breath caught. 2. The world held its breath with him. 3. The eastern ridge erupted in thunder. The diversion charges set by Madsen's men shattered the night, rolling sound across the mountains like a wave. In the tent, the enemy jolted, heads snapping toward the sound, screens momentarily forgotten. Ana moved. Vance didn't see her. He forced himself forward, scrambling low, fumbling with the scrambler, heart in his throat. His hand shook so badly he nearly dropped it. He slapped it against the antenna base, armed it, and ran. 10 seconds. 10 seconds. The hum began, low, invisible, vibrating through the ground. The enemy monitors flickered and died, their connection severed. Vance turned, panting, chest burning. He made it to the canyon entrance before the fear drove him to glance back. And what he saw would mark him forever. Ana was a storm of black in the collapsing glow of the tent. She wasn't firing wildly. She wasn't wasting movement. She was precise. A suppressed shot, a knife flash, a body dropping before a sound escaped its throat. One man raised a weapon. She was already inside his guard, twisting, silencing, moving on before his body hit the dirt. It lasted 20 seconds, maybe less. 5 men fell, none got a shot off. The silence that followed was deeper than before. She stood calm, posture steady, breathing controlled. The drone loomed above her, tethered to dead machines. She bent, picked up a hardened data brick, the cipher, and tucked it against her chest. Then, with the same precision, she placed small charges along the equipment, on the drone itself, each set with the care of a craftsman. Not to obliterate, but to surgically burn the tech so only its true engineers could repair it. Vance stared, body trembling. He had been part of something impossible, not a battle, a dismantling. Ana walked to him, visor still down, the cipher in her hand. "Job done, Corporal," she said simply. No triumph, no arrogance, just fact. "Let's go home." They moved back through the canyon shadows. The charges behind them flared with blue fire, popping electronics, frying circuits. By the time the enemy reinforcements came, there would be nothing left but ruin. The walk back was wordless. Vance stumbled, lungs burning, but Ana Karice walked as if the mountain itself bent to her rhythm, calm, silent, untouched by the violence she had just unleashed. Only when the perimeter lights of Fob Nightingale came into view did he finally exhale. And yet part of him knew he hadn't just walked beside a soldier. He had walked beside a myth. Back at the base, the atmosphere had shifted. The panic that had poisoned the air for 3 days was gone, replaced by a taut, almost reverent anticipation. Everyone knew something had happened. Something had shifted the tide. Inside the TOC, Colonel Madsen stood waiting. His uniform was wrinkled, his face gaunt from sleepless nights, but his posture was rigid, his eyes clearer than before. Ana walked in, visor still down. She placed the cipher on the holographic table. The small dark brick sat heavy in the center of the room. Proof. Salvation. "Asset secured, Colonel," she said. The words were flat, professional, the way someone might report finishing a repair, but everyone in the room knew what it meant. Madsen's eyes stayed on her visor. He saw his own reflection, pale, lined with shame. Then she lifted the helmet free, seals hissing softly, and Ana Sharma's face emerged. Silver hair damp with sweat, dirt streaked across her cheek, but her eyes were the same, calm, unshaken, ancient. She wasn't a ghost, she wasn't a god, she was just a woman, and somehow that made it harder to look away. Madsen felt the weight of his earlier contempt. The way he had dismissed her, sneered at her. It pressed against his chest now, heavier than failure. Slowly, deliberately, he straightened, raised his hand to his brow, and delivered the sharpest salute of his career, not to a subordinate, not to a civilian, to a warrior. "Ma'am," he said, voice thick, "on behalf of this command, thank you." Around him, the entire staff followed, hands snapping to brows, a roomful of tired soldiers saluting a woman whose uniform had been thrown away long ago. Ana didn't salute back. She gave a single nod, small, quiet, enough. The uniform was gone, but dignity wasn't something that could be boxed up. And in that moment, surrounded by men who had doubted her, she claimed something deeper than recognition. She claimed truth. What does victory sound like when no one is allowed to cheer? The return to Fob Nightingale was silent. The dawn sky was bruised purple, shadows still clinging to the valley floor. Ana walked in the lead, visor down, the cipher brick cradled against her chest. Vance followed, 5 meters back, just as she had told him. His boots stumbled, knees threatening to buckle, but he forced himself upright, step after step. He couldn't falter now, not with her ahead of him. The 2 figures slipped past the wire, through the layers of defenses, into the heart of the base. Guards who spotted them froze. They knew without words that the cipher was back, but no one shouted. No one clapped. It wasn't that kind of triumph. Inside the TOC, the air had shifted. Where panic had once thickened every breath, there was now a taut, reverent quiet. Officers stood in rows, waiting. Ana entered first. The black visor reflected their faces back at them. She didn't announce herself. She didn't need to. She walked straight to the holographic table where the blinking enemy message had taunted them for 3 days. She set the cipher down in its place, a dull thunk against glass. "Asset secured, Colonel," she said. Her voice was steady, almost detached. A mission report, nothing more. But the room inhaled, a collective breath of relief, of disbelief, of shame. Madsen looked at the cipher, then at her. Slowly, with deliberate care, Ana unclipped her helmet. The hiss of pressure seals broke the silence. She lifted it free, revealing her face. Silver hair clung damp to her forehead. A streak of dirt carved down her cheek. Her eyes, calm, ancient, steady, swept the room. She looked older now, Vance thought. Older than when she'd arrived. And yet younger, too, as though some part of her had been reawakened. Madsen straightened, his shoulders pulled back, his posture aligned. With the weight of shame pressing down, he raised his hand and saluted. Sharp. Perfect. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thick, "on behalf of this command, thank you." The words cracked, stripped of arrogance, stripped of everything except truth. Every officer behind him followed. A room full of men saluting the woman they had dismissed, ignored, even mocked. Ana did not salute back. She gave a single nod, slow, almost imperceptible, acceptance. Enough. For a moment, silence became reverence. Vance stood near the door, hands trembling, exhaustion threatening to fold him in half. He lifted his own hand in salute. His was not perfect, not sharp, but it was honest, and somehow Ana noticed his more than the rest. She nodded once, the faintest smile ghosting across her lips. The uniform they had thrown away had been for a sergeant in logistics. What stood before them now was not a uniform. It was something no fabric could contain. The sun rose slowly over the mountains. Shadows retreated. Light bled into the sky, painting it in golds and violets. Fob Nightingale stirred to life. The panic of the last 3 days was gone, replaced by a quiet rhythm, but the bass had changed. Everyone felt it. Something had walked among them in the night, and they would never be the same. On the landing pad, the massive H-53 Super Stallion spun its rotors. Dust rose in swirling clouds. Ana stood beside it, once more in her plain slacks and dark jacket. The black gear had been repacked into its anonymous Pelican cases. To anyone else, she was again just a retiree, a quiet woman with tired eyes. Colonel Madsen stood with her. The awkwardness of their first meeting had burned away. What remained was something closer to respect, or maybe humility. "The official report will list recovery to a specialized intelligence asset," he said, his voice carrying over the thrum of rotors. "Your name won't appear anywhere." Ana's gaze rested on the mountains, the jagged horizon catching light. "That's for the best." Vance was nearby, overseeing the loading of her cases. She turned, found his eyes. "Will you be all right, Corporal?" she asked. He blinked, startled that she cared to ask. He stepped forward, posture awkward, deferential. "I'll be fine, ma'am, thank you." He hesitated, then added, "It was an honor." Ana gave him something no one else had seen, a small smile, faint, fragile but real. "You did well, Corporal," she said. "You kept your head, you followed orders, that's all that matters." The words burned into him, not as consolation but as recognition. He would remember them forever. She turned back to Madsen, her eyes sharp again. "Your base is secure, Colonel, but you still have vulnerabilities. I left an audit on your desk. You should read it." Madsen gave a small nod. "I will first thing." He hesitated, then extended his hand. "Anya," he said quietly, "thank you." She took his hand, firm, calloused, the grip of someone who had never truly stopped being a soldier. "Just do your job, Colonel," she said softly. That's thanks enough. Then she released him and walked up the ramp into the belly of the helicopter, without looking back. The heavy aircraft lifted, rotors pounding the air, dust swirling. The base shrank beneath her, a small pocket of order in a vast, chaotic land. Through the port window, she watched until it was only a blur, then only a memory. Her reflection in the glass stared back. Silver hair, lined face. But for a fleeting instant she saw another reflection superimposed, the black visor, the faceless helmet, the ghost of Karice staring back. She closed her eyes, the reflection faded, only Ana remained. Inside the TOC, hours later, Colonel Madsen sat alone at his desk. The base hummed around him, alive again, but his office was silent. He opened the audit Ana had left, a thin folder of notes in her neat, compact handwriting. Every vulnerability laid bare, every weakness she had seen in less than a day, not as condemnation but as truth. He read slowly, deliberately, absorbing the lessons. Each word carried weight, each observation cut deeper than he wanted to admit. When he closed the folder, he sat back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He had led men for decades. He had faced fire and loss and terror, but never had he felt so small. And yet, strangely, he did not feel diminished. He felt sharpened. Ana Sharma had left him with more than an audit. She had left him with perspective, a reminder that arrogance blinds but humility sharpens. That leadership isn't about the rank you wear, but the courage to listen when the truth walks through your door. He exhaled, long and steady. For the first time in days, he allowed himself the smallest flicker of hope. On the helicopter, Ana leaned back in her seat. The vibration of the engines hummed through her bones. Her eyes were closed, but her mind was not at rest. The black cases sat secured beside her, closed, silent, like coffins holding a life she had buried long ago. Karice. The name lingered in her thoughts, sharp as a blade. The general had spoken it like an invocation, pulling her back from the quiet exile she had built. She had walked into shadows again, and shadows had welcomed her like an old friend. But was that who she still was? Her hand rested lightly on the case. Through the steel, she could almost feel the cold weight of the visor, the faceless armor, the second skin that turned her into something more than human and less. The mountains slipped away beneath the chopper. She thought of Vance, of his trembling salute, of the awe in his eyes. She thought of Madsen's rigid hand raised in respect. She thought of all the soldiers who had whispered against her when she arrived, and who now watched her leave with reverence. Respect, recognition, honor. She had earned them without asking, without demanding, without needing. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Her eyes opened again, gazing out the window. The horizon stretched endless. Ana Sharma, logistics officer, retiree, the life she had chosen. Karice, ghost, weapon of last resort, the life she could never fully leave. Both lived inside her, and both carried a truth she would have to face sooner or later. For now, she closed her eyes once more. Let the vibration of the engines lull her toward peace, if only temporary. Because somewhere beyond the horizon, shadows would rise again, and when they did, they would whisper her name. Not Ana. Karice. What happens to a soldier when the war they fought doesn't end on the battlefield? The helicopter roared west, blades hammering against the thinning air, but inside the cabin there was only the hum of vibration and the low hiss of recycled oxygen. Ana sat alone on one side, seatbelt loose across her lap. Her eyes stayed closed. She looked asleep. But she was. The cases sat bolted to the floor beside her, black, heavy, silent. To anyone else they were equipment. To her they were mirrors. Every vibration of the helicopter made her feel the weight of what rested inside. The faceless visor, the second skin, the tools of a life she had walked away from. Her hand drifted to one case. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She could already feel the ghost pressing against her skin. Karice. The name hung heavy, even inside her own mind. The general had spoken it like a spell, summoning her back into existence. And when the visor had come down over her eyes, she had slipped into the role like a memory her body hadn't forgotten. Lethal, silent, efficient. She had thought that part of her was gone. That Ana Sharma, retired logistics, had buried Karice so deep that she'd never surface again. But the canyon had proved otherwise. She had moved through shadow, dismantled enemies, retrieved the cipher, erased their presence. Not a stumble, not a pause. 20 seconds of violence, and it had all come back not with struggle but with ease. And that was what frightened her most. Not that she could still do it, but that part of her still wanted to. Her eyes opened slowly. The mountains fell away beneath the helicopter, endless ridges fading into the pale dawn. She let the horizon fill her vision, but she couldn't shake the reflection she'd seen in the port window earlier, her lined face overlaid with the faceless visor. Ana Sharma, Karice, 2 names, 1 woman, and only one of them belonged to the world. Back at Fob Nightingale, the air was different. Soldiers moved with precision again. Orders were followed. Confidence had seeped back into their steps, though fatigue still weighed on their shoulders. The panic that had suffocated them for 3 days was gone. Colonel Madsen stood in his office, the audit folder still open on his desk. He had read it twice. Every page felt like a scalpel cutting through layers of pride he hadn't realized were there. Weaknesses laid bare, vulnerabilities that could have cost lives. And she had seen them in hours. He closed the folder carefully, hands steady, though his stomach was. In his career, he had prided himself on being the one who saw farther, who anticipated threats, who could outthink the enemy. But Ana Sharma, Karice, had stepped into his command and with calm observation seen what he had missed. It should have broken him, but instead it steadied him. Humility, he realized, wasn't a wound, it was a weapon. He exhaled long, slow. "Do your job, Colonel," she had told him. He would, and he would do it better than before, because of her. His eyes drifted to the photograph on his desk, his wife, his kids, smiling in a world untouched by the dust and noise of these mountains. For 72 hours, he had thought his failure would stain their lives forever. But Ana had lifted that weight, and she had asked for nothing in return. The salute he had given her earlier had been more than respect. It had been confession and redemption. Corporal Vance hadn't slept. He sat on the edge of his bunk, gear still on, hands trembling as he tried to lace his boots for the 3rd time. His fingers wouldn't listen. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, Ana in the canyon, flowing like shadow, dismantling 5 men with a precision that looked like something beyond human. He tried to tell himself it was just training, just experience, but it was, he knew it was. When she had picked him, he had thought it was a mistake, just some logistical need, a babysitter role, but she had chosen him. And now he knew why. It wasn't because he was the strongest, or the fastest, or the bravest. It was because he followed, because he listened, because when fear threatened to break him, he still obeyed. "You did well," she had said. "You kept your head." He repeated the words under his breath, a mantra against the trembling. She had seen him, not his rank, not his inexperience, him. For the rest of his life, that would mean more than any medal. He finally tied his boots, standing, shoulders squared. His body still shook, but his spine was straight. He wasn't the same boy who had set up her terminal in a dusty storage room. That boy had been left behind in the canyon. What walked out was something else. The base moved on. Reports were filed. Repairs were made. Soldiers rotated back to duty. On paper, it would read like any other classified crisis, averted, minimized, erased from official history. But for the men who had lived it, it wasn't a line in a report. It was a scar. Whispers spread among them, not loud, not reckless, quiet, half-believing. She wasn't logistics. She wasn't a consultant. She was something else. No one said the name Karice aloud. No one dared, but they knew, and they carried the weight of that knowledge like contraband. Because legends weren't supposed to walk into your base, dismantle a crisis, and leave without a trace. Legends weren't supposed to salute with silence, then vanish into the sky. And yet one had. High above the mountains, Ana leaned her head back against the bulkhead. She wasn't sleeping. She was listening to the hum of the helicopter, the distant thunder of her own thoughts. She thought of Vance, the boy's eyes wide with awe and fear. She had seen something in him, something steady, something rare. She thought of Madsen, the way his contempt had burned away, leaving humility in its place. He had been humbled, that was good. He would grow. She thought of the men in the canyon. 5 lives ended in silence. She didn't flinch. She didn't excuse. She accepted. It was the currency of the life she had once lived, and tonight she had spent it again. Her hand tightened on the armrest. Peace was fragile, always fragile, and though she wanted to believe this mission was the last, she knew better. Shadows didn't fade, they lingered, waiting. And when they rose again, someone would whisper her name. Not Ana. Karice. Her eyes opened steady, calm, ancient. The helicopter pressed west, carrying her back toward a life she had thought permanent. A life of quiet rooms and forgotten uniforms. But she knew now what she hadn't wanted to admit. Karice wasn't gone, she was waiting. And when the world needed her again, she would answer. Because dignity doesn't speak. It acts. What does peace feel like when your hands still remember war? 2 days after Fob Nightingale, Ana Sharma sat alone at her kitchen table in a small, quiet house at the edge of a quiet town. The kind of place where the loudest sound was the hum of an old refrigerator, where the air smelled faintly of pine and rain on asphalt. On the table sat a chipped ceramic mug of tea, steam curling upward. She cradled it with both hands, letting the heat soak into her skin. From the outside, she looked like any retiree. A woman with silver-streaked hair, lined face, eyes softened by years. But inside, her bones still vibrated with the helicopter's hum. Her body remembered the canyon, the crunch of gravel under boots, the scent of dust and oil, the weight of the suppressed sidearm in her hand. It remembered the precise rhythm of violence, the way her muscles had obeyed without hesitation. Peace felt wrong against skin that still carried war. She had folded the jacket and slacks she wore into the laundry, ordinary clothes, civilian clothes, but as she looked at them now hanging on a chair, she realized how strange they seemed. They didn't fit, not after the black suit, not after Karice had walked again. The black cases were gone, taken away as quickly as they had appeared, but she still felt their weight, like shadows in the corner of her mind. Karice hadn't left. She was packing just behind her reflection, waiting. Ana sipped her tea slowly, eyes fixed on the window. Outside, the world moved on. A neighbor walked their dog. A delivery truck rumbled down the street. The world had no idea that a war had almost swallowed a sector whole. And that was how it had always been. The public lived in the light. She worked in the dark. But what haunted her wasn't what she had done. It was how easily she had done it. 20 seconds in a canyon. 5 men erased. The cipher retrieved. Mission complete. And when it was over, she hadn't shaken. She hadn't faltered. She had felt alive. Ana set the mug down slowly, her hands tightening around it. She hated herself for that thought. Peace wasn't supposed to feel empty, but it did. At Fob Nightingale, Corporal Elias Vance sat in the mess tent, staring at untouched food on his tray. The noise of voices around him blurred, fading in and out. Every clatter of a tray, every scrape of a chair against concrete jolted him like gunfire. He had survived. He had returned, but part of him hadn't come back from the canyon. He saw her every time he closed his eyes. Not Ana the quiet consultant, not the woman who had thanked him for tea, But Karice, visor down, knife flashing, moving like shadow. The violence had been so fast, so precise, that he couldn't even categorize it. It hadn't been a firefight. It hadn't been combat. It had been inevitability. And he had been there, 10 meters away, watching death flow like water. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his fork. He forced himself to take a bite, forced himself to chew, but he couldn't taste anything. She had changed him. Not by what she said. She hadn't lectured, hadn't instructed, hadn't told him who to become. She had simply chosen him, trusted him, made him part of something bigger than himself. "You did well," her words replayed in his head like a lifeline. And so, though his body shook, though his dreams were filled with shadows, he felt something else too. A spark, a determination he hadn't known he had. If she saw something in him, then he would live up to it. He didn't know how yet, but he would. Colonel Madsen walked the perimeter of the base at dusk, boots crunching over gravel. Soldiers saluted as he passed, their eyes steadier now, their postures sharper. The base had been scarred but not broken, and it was because of her. He had read the audit a third time. Each note was surgical, each flaw exposed with precision. He had ordered changes immediately, shifts in guard rotations, reinforcement of utility systems, audits of forgotten lines and conduits. But the audit wasn't the only thing haunting him. It was her. Ana Sharma, Karice. The myth had walked his halls, dismantled his crisis, then left without ceremony. She hadn't demanded recognition. She hadn't even wanted it. But he would never forget. His salute had been more than protocol. It had been confession. She had reminded him what leadership truly meant. Not authority, not command, but humility. The ability to listen when the truth came from an unexpected voice. He stopped at the northern wall, staring out at the jagged peaks where the canyon lay hidden. He wondered how many more shadows were out there, how many more forgotten conduits, how many more ghosts. And a darker thought struck him. If Karice had returned, then what enemy had forced her back? Far away, in a room lit only by screens, a man watched a replay of the Nightingale breach. Not the official report, those were already sanitized, erased, buried. No, this was raw. Data streams, intercepted comms, fragments of chatter stitched together. He leaned back, cigarette smoke curling in the dim light. His face was half hidden by shadow, but his eyes burned sharp with interest. So the Americans had countered, quickly, quietly, effectively. And someone had done it with precision he hadn't expected. He exhaled slowly. "Karice," he murmured. The name tasted like memory, like old scars. It had been years since he'd heard whispers of her, a ghost they had said was buried, gone. But ghosts never stayed dead. He stubbed out the cigarette, eyes narrowing at the screen. If she's back, the game has changed. Outside his window, another world stirred, one preparing, arming, waiting. The cipher breach had only been the first move. The real war hadn't even begun. Back at her kitchen table, Ana felt the tea cooling in her mug. She hadn't touched it in minutes. Her eyes remained on the window, but her mind was far away, still in the canyon, still in the shadows, still listening to silence thick with danger. She told herself it was over, that she could slip back into anonymity, that her name was Ana Sharma again, that Karice was buried. But she knew the truth. The ghost was awake. And shadows, once awakened, never fully return to sleep. How do you convince yourself the war is over when you can still smell it on your skin? Ana Sharma stood at her bathroom sink, the faucet running cold. She splashed water on her face, rubbed hard, as though she could scrub away the canyon, the drone, the shadows. When she looked up, droplets sliding down her lined cheeks, she froze. The mirror betrayed her. For an instant she didn't see Ana, she saw Karice, black visor, faceless, waiting. Her hand gripped the edge of the sink until her knuckles whitened. She blinked hard and the visor was gone, just her reflection, just Ana, But the ghost had been there, and she knew it would come back. Back at Fob Nightingale, the base moved as though nothing had happened. Patrols rotated. Drones flew their patterns again. Reports were filed and buried. But for Corporal Vance, nothing was the same. He woke before dawn, laced his boots tighter, ran the perimeter twice instead of once. Every free moment he studied schematics, sensor logs, the kind of data Ana had asked for. He forced himself to notice patterns, to see what others dismissed as noise. He wasn't her. He would never move like Shadow, never dismantle a canyon of enemies with silence and steel. But he could learn. He could prepare. Because he knew something the others didn't. Karice existed, and if the world could call her back once, it would again. When that happened, he wanted to be ready. Colonel Madsen stared at his terminal late into the night. Reports scrolled, lines of intercepted chatter flagged and analyzed. Most of it was nothing, static, but he had learned something valuable from Ana Sharma. Noise mattered. In the last 24 hours, they had picked up anomalies near the northern border, unusual power surges, patterns that shouldn't exist, too small to be actionable, too vague to brief higher command. But Madsen's gut clenched. The cipher breach had been loud, messy, sloppy. Ana had said it herself. Professionals didn't make sloppy mistakes unless they wanted you to see them, unless it was bait. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling hard. He didn't want to admit it, not to his men, not even to himself. But he knew. The breach wasn't the end. It was the opening move. And Ana, Karice, had been forced into the game again because someone wanted her there. Far away, in a room buried beneath concrete and steel, the man with the cigarettes reviewed another set of reports. This time, it wasn't about drones or ciphers. It was about people. Photographs spread across his desk, grainy surveillance shots. One showed Ana stepping off the helicopter in civilian clothes, her slacks and jacket rumpled from the flight. Another, taken from half a world away, showed her walking to a market with a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. She looked ordinary, forgettable. But he knew better. He tapped the photograph lightly, leaving a smear of ash. "You shouldn't have come back," he muttered. His subordinate, a younger officer with cold eyes, shifted uneasily. "Do you want her eliminated?" The man shook his head. "No, not yet. Killing her makes her a martyr. Better to let her live. Better to draw her out, force her hand." He slid the photographs aside, revealing a map beneath. Pins, strings, circles drawn in red ink. The cipher breach had been only a probe, a test. The real strike was coming. And it wouldn't target a drone. It would target everything. Ana sat on her porch, evening air cool against her skin. She cradled another mug of tea, watching the sun slip low over the rooftops. Children laughed somewhere down the street. A dog barked. The world turned, unbothered, as if nothing had changed. But she couldn't stop scanning. Every car that passed, every unfamiliar face, every flicker of movement in the shadows, her eyes tracked, cataloged, analyzed. She hated it. She had promised herself she was done, that the black cases would stay closed, that Ana Sharma would outlive Karice. But she knew the truth. Peace wasn't built for her. Her phone buzzed once, sharp, not her civilian line, the secure one, the one she hadn't touched in years. Her stomach sank. She stared at it for a long time before answering. The voice on the other end was clipped, controlled, familiar. "We may need you again." She closed her eyes. The tea cooled in her hand. Of course they did. Back at Nightingale, Vance sat on the steps outside the barracks, the night air biting. He traced the grooves of the scrambler unit she had trusted him with, now deactivated, inert. His hands remembered the weight of it, the countdown in his head, the way she had told him not to wait for her. He thought of her words, "You did well, you followed orders." But he wondered, could he do more? She had seen something in him, But what strength, obedience, potential? Or maybe just reflection, a reminder of who she had been once long ago, before Karice. He didn't know, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going back to who he had been before. He couldn't. Colonel Madsen stood at the map table again, hands braced against the glass. His staff moved around him, quieter now, sharper. They had seen how quickly the world could turn inside out. He tapped the screen, zooming in on the northern range. "Keep eyes here," he ordered. "Any anomaly, I don't care how small." His officers exchanged looks, some skeptical, some uneasy. But Madsen's tone brooked no argument. He knew the game had shifted, and if Ana Sharma had taught him anything, it was this: the real enemy was never where you expected them to be. In her quiet kitchen, Ana set the phone down after the call. Her hand lingered on it, fingers pressing lightly against the black plastic. She could still hear the clipped voice in her ear. "We may need you again." She hated the inevitability of it. She had tried to be Ana Sharma. She had tried to be normal, but Karice wasn't gone. She was waiting, watching, pressing against the glass of her reflection. Ana closed her eyes, breathing slow. She wanted peace, but peace wanted nothing to do with her. And somewhere across the world, the man in the shadows lit another cigarette, smoke curling upward like a signal. "Let her live," he whispered to himself. "Let her think she has a choice." He exhaled, the smoke spreading thin. "Then we'll take it from her." What happens when the ghost you tried to bury comes knocking at your door? Ana Sharma woke before dawn, though she hadn't truly slept. Her house was quiet, the kind of silence that should have been comforting. Instead, it pressed against her like a weight. She stood at the window, mug in hand, watching the first gray light creep across the street. Neighbors would rise soon. The world would stretch, yawn, carry on. But her body remained on edge. Every shift of shadow, every flicker of headlights, every sound of tires on wet asphalt, her eyes tracked them, her muscles ready. Karice wasn't sleeping either. The phone rang, the secure one. She didn't rush to answer. She let it ring 3 times, each chime echoing through her ribs before she lifted it to her ear. "Sharma," a voice said. It was Tanaka this time. Different tone, deeper. "We have movement, it's not over, we need you." Her jaw tightened. "You said it was resolved." It was contained, not resolved. The breach wasn't the operation, it was the prelude. Ana closed her eyes. She had known. Deep down she had known. "Coordinates?" she asked. "Sending now." She hung up before he could say more. The phone buzzed in her hand, a set of encrypted numbers lighting up the screen. Her tea sat untouched. She didn't even notice it go cold. At Fob Nightingale, Colonel Madsen stood with his XO, eyes fixed on a fresh feed streaming across the holographic map. Explosions along the northern border. Not random, coordinated. Power surges mapped to supply routes. Local militia suddenly armed with weapons far beyond their means. He felt the old panic tighten his chest, the same helpless spiral from before. But then he steadied. He remembered Ana in the TOC, dismantling his arrogance with calm precision. Noise mattered, small details mattered. He leaned in, scanning the anomalies the way the power grids flickered in perfect intervals. Not chaos, not error, design. His voice was quiet but sharp. "They're building something, and we're already inside its shadow." The room stilled. No one argued. Madsen straightened, his decision made. "Get me a secure line, Sharma." Vance was in the comms bay, calibrating a drone relay when the call came. He wasn't supposed to hear it. He wasn't supposed to be on that channel. But her voice, calm, steady, inevitable, filled his headset all the same. "I'll need him," Ana said. "Him?" Vance froze. The officer on the other end hesitated. "Corporal Vance, he's steady," Ana cut in. "He listens, he follows, I don't need more than that." Vance's throat tightened. She hadn't forgotten. She hadn't dismissed him once the canyon was behind them. She had chosen him again. He didn't feel ready. He might never feel ready. But if she saw something in him, then he wouldn't argue. He whispered to himself, almost a prayer, "Don't fail her." The rendezvous point was nothing more than a hangar, dim and empty, somewhere between the mountains and the border. Ana arrived first, her jacket buttoned, her boots plain. She looked like a civilian stepping out of an unmarked car. But waiting on the concrete floor were the black cases. She stared at them for a long time, too long, as though by refusing to open them she could hold back the tide. But tides don't wait. Her fingers unlatched the first case. The visor stared back at her, faceless, patient. Piece by piece, she shed Ana Sharma. Piece by piece, she became Karice again. Vance arrived moments later, guided into the hangar by a junior officer. He froze when he saw her, half donned in black, the grandmother figure dissolving into something else entirely. His mouth went dry. She didn't look at him at first. She adjusted a strap, clipped a harness, checked the chamber of her sidearm. Only then did she turn, visor under her arm. "You came," she said simply. "Yes, ma'am," his voice cracked. "Don't call me ma'am," she said, tone flat but not cruel. "Out there, rank doesn't matter, only discipline." Yes, he caught himself, understood. She studied him for a moment. His stance, his eyes, the way his hands clenched against his thighs, fear but not weakness. "Stay behind me. 5 meters, you know the rest." He nodded. The visor slid down. Kara stood before him again. The mission wasn't a canyon this time. It was bigger, wider. The enemy hadn't just stolen a cipher. They had infiltrated networks across the border, embedding themselves like rot in the foundation of regional stability. Their strike wasn't a theft, it was a message. And Ana Karice was the answer. The insertion was quiet, a small transport low altitude under radar. They landed in scrubland, the night air sharp and biting. Shadows stretched long over sand and stone. Karice led, Vance followed. Every sound pressed against his nerves, the crunch of sand, the hiss of wind, the faint buzz of distant power lines. But she moved as though none of it mattered. Her presence cut through his fear like a blade through fog. They reached the compound just before dawn. Not a fortress, not a base. A forgotten industrial shell, wires and generators humming inside. But Vance's headset crackled with chatter, encrypted signals bouncing in unnatural rhythm. The breach wasn't just physical anymore. It was a hub, a nest. Through a crack in the wall, Vance saw men inside. Not soldiers, technicians. Dozens of them hunched over consoles, lines of code spilling across screens. Ana whispered into comms. "They're mapping the region, not just surveillance. Infrastructure, power, water, transit. They want to blind an entire sector." Her words landed like stone. Vance's pulse spiked. How do we stop them? Her visor turned toward him. The reflection of his own trembling face looked back. "We don't stop them," she said quietly. "We erase them." The breach into the compound was silent, surgical. Vance planted scramblers where she pointed, each pulse severing another connection, cutting another thread of the enemy's web. He moved clumsily, but he moved. Ana flowed through shadow, dismantling sentries before they could speak. Her sidearm whispered, her knife flickered. The chaos never spread. Panic never had time to bloom. By the time the sun crested the horizon, the compound was dark, screens dead, generators silent, men sprawled motionless. Vance stood in the silence, chest heaving, staring at the ruin they had wrought. His stomach churned, bile rising. It wasn't glory, it wasn't triumph, it was erasure. Ana stood calm, visor reflecting the pale dawn. She placed a final charge, blue fire arcing as the last server melted. "It's done," she said. Vance swallowed hard. What now? She lifted the cipher brick she had recovered, heavy in her hand. "Now we disappear." Back at the extraction point, the transport waited. The pilot didn't ask questions, didn't look, didn't want to know. Ana boarded first, her black armor scuffed, visor still down. Vance followed, his body trembling, his eyes wide. Neither spoke until the engines roared and the land shrank beneath them. Only then did Ana lift her visor. Her face emerged, lined, tired but steady. She looked at Vance. His hands shook, his breath came ragged, his eyes begged for something, explanation, comfort, meaning. "You followed," she said softly. He nodded, couldn't speak. "You kept your head." His throat tightened, "But I was afraid." Her gaze didn't waver. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, Corporal, it's walking through it. You walked." The words broke something inside him. He nodded again, tears stinging at the corners of his eyes. He didn't wipe them away. Ana leaned back, visor in her lap. She didn't look at the horizon, she looked inward. Karice was awake now, awake and restless. But Ana Sharma, the woman who drank tea at a kitchen table, who wanted peace, she was still here too. 2 lives, 2 names, 1 truth. She would never escape the shadows, but maybe, just maybe, she could choose when to step into them. Hours later, the transport landed at a classified strip. Officials waited, their suits sharp, their eyes hollow. They took the cipher. They asked no questions. Ana walked away before they could say more. No debrief, no recognition, no name in a report. Just silence. That night, back in her small house, she poured herself another mug of tea, sat at the same kitchen table, looked out the same window. The world was unchanged. Children laughed, dogs barked, cars passed. But she was changed again. Her reflection in the glass met her eyes. For a moment it was just Ana Sharma, ordinary, human. Then faintly Karice flickered back, the visor, the ghost. Ana didn't look away, she didn't deny it, she accepted it. Because some shadows you don't banish, you live with them. She lifted her mug, sipped slowly, set it down, and whispered to the empty room, as though to herself, as though to the ghost behind the glass. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The words settled in the silence like truth. The night deepened, the world carried on. And somewhere in the quiet between shadows and light, Ana Sharma finally closed her eyes. Not at peace, but at rest. For now,